Welcome. My name is Michael Denon. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy here at UC Irvine. I'm also our Vice Provost for Teaching and Learning and Dean of the Division of Undergraduate Education, which I realize is an incredibly long title, but I like to shorten it to VPTL because it sounds a little more, formal and important. What we're going to be doing here in this series is having students get the opportunity to ask me any question they want. This really is an open forum. It's meant to be both informative and fun. The questions can be about UCI, they can be about me, they can be about stuff I do, they can be about concerns the students have, things they really like about UCI, what they think the future might be, how they could end up being a vice provost themselves, or different ways they can chart their future careers and paths. So it really is a very open-ended forum, and it's exciting to me because I love talking to students. I love finding out what they're thinking, what they're interested in, and what they are concerned about. So we're looking forward to a lot of fun and a lot of good questions.
Hello, my name is Mina Nada. I am a third-year Earth Systems Science student in the School of Physical Sciences, and I want to specialize in oceanography. Za.
Hello, I'm Patrina Suggs. I'm a second-year English major, and I want to specialize in creative writing.
Excellent. Well, we'll get to some questions now from our first two guests.
I like to consider myself as like a man of science, and you being a professor of physics yourself, I was wondering, what's your take on how will teaching and education shape our like moral and ethical boundaries that society will have to come to terms with in the not too distant future? Because I'm always reading on these science articles about how we're trying to put our genetic engineering aspects in, try to cure Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all this stuff like that. So I just wanted to get your take on it.
Well, that's a great question because I think often in the sciences, if you think about it, we don't necessarily at the undergraduate level and even at the graduate level worry about teaching sort of ethics and moral decision making, right? We focus just on the science. And you're right, we're at a very exciting time. From a technology point of view, computational power has been a big transformative feature, and then just our ability to measure at the really small level and get down to the detail. However, we still don't fully understand even the science of complex systems. If you look at the history of science up to now, it's been very reductionist. It's very good at looking at the smaller and smaller pieces, but what we aren't great at yet is understanding the complex systems and how they fit together, because that requires mathematics at a higher level and a different type of mathematics, computational power and other things. And it's really in those complex systems and a lot of the examples you brought up, particularly around genetic engineering and health. But there's going to be other big questions. We're going to learn a lot more about consciousness, both from our ability to measure things with the brain and our computational tools to mimic, either simulate or come close to or maybe even actually reproduce consciousness in, say, computers or in those systems. And what you do with that is really, in the end of the day, ethical and moral questions. And that's not really something science is geared to answer. We're geared to answer questions about how the world works, not what we should do with that. But that should be part of the science education. And one of the challenges, if you think about undergraduate education, universities have been around for a very, very long time. And we still take just 4 years to teach undergraduates. But we know a lot more. And if our undergraduate education is focused purely on transmitting knowledge, we don't have enough time to do that. And if that's all we're worried about, we don't carve out the space to really look at some of these other more important skills. Critical thinking, complex problem solving, working in teams, being an independent learner. And underlying that is sort of that moral and ethical decision making. So figuring out how to integrate that into the curriculum, whether you do a standalone class or whether you make sure it's weaved in everywhere, or you do both. These are some of the questions my office will be encouraging faculty to ask of each other so we can figure out how to tackle those challenging educational problems that come along with the challenging science problems. So that's a great question. I really like that. Thank you.
I wanted to know about your book because I love writing, and I realized that you wrote an entire book. So.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. What's that about?
So yeah, that was kind of a freaky experience in many ways. So I have a book, and I can make a plug for it. It's called Divine Science: Finding Reason at the Heart of Faith. And one of the interesting things about it, now, unlike you, I know you want to do creative fiction, creative writing, which I could never imagine doing, right? The thought of actually coming up with something like that's fiction, boggles my mind. what I was really interested in doing, I do a lot of public speaking on science. And two areas I do it are a lot of superheroes and pop culture, and I also do a lot of speaking on science and religion, science and faith. And I have to be honest, I was interested in getting paid just a little bit to speak, because you spend all this time speaking, it's a lot of my time, and particularly as I became a dean and a vice provost, I have less time. And I went around and I researched it, and this is one of those things I think is good for students to kind of understand. I mean, I've been doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm 19 years into my career as a physics professor. I've been a grad student, a postdoc, now I'm an administrator. And you want to do something new, and it's like, how do you figure out how to get into it? And of all things, I asked my daughter's dance teacher, the woman who manages the dance school, do you know any agents? I've been told if I want to speak, I need an agent. And maybe dance agents know people who are agents for speakers. I know that seems like a big leap, but I didn't know anything else to do. And unfortunately, or fortunately, she got me in touch not with an agent, but with a guy who runs a ghostwriting company, which not sure where that connection was. And I met with him, and he explained that if you want to be a public speaker, particularly one that gets a fee and stuff, you need a book. People only invite speakers who have books. And he said, well, what do you like to speak about? And I told him superheroes and science and religion and science. So fascinatingly enough, he said, well, you need to write the book God is the Ultimate Superhero, because that combines your religion, your science, and superheroes. And it's a cool title. So I set out to do that. And I did hire a guy who was somewhere between a ghostwriter and kind of a research assistant, who was awesome and really helped me. Because again, not this being my full-time professional job, writing, as you know, is hard and takes a lot of work. And I didn't have the time to do the writing part, but I had but the book I had in my head, and I knew what I wanted it to be, and I could tell someone it, and they could write exactly what I wanted it to be. So it really is, this is one thing I learned about ghostwriting. It really is still your book and your writing. It's just someone's helping you with it. And that's something we often need in life, is help with the things we're trying to do. And that's how the whole thing emerged from that. And a little bit of life is luck and asking people for help. I was going to self-publish, and to do that, you have to get quotes for your book from people. So I sent out emails to friends and said, can you give me a quote? Here's 5 choices. This would be great if you said these things about my book. But if you want to say something else, that's okay. And one of my friends happens to, he's a writer who gets published a lot on religion and knows a publisher, and actually got my book in front of the publisher, and they agreed to publish it. And so the rest was kind of history. And I did learn, someone had warned me, publishers always change the title of books, and that's why it's not called God is the Ultimate Superhero, but called Divine Science, Finding Reason at the Heart of Faith. Because in the end, the book I wrote really didn't match that title, so I'm still planning to maybe write a book that matches that title. But it was an interesting and fun experience, and really interesting to get into it from this odd direction of doing something completely different in my life. And it shows that combination of being alert for opportunities, asking lots of questions, putting yourself out there, but also getting a little bit lucky.
One of my favorite pastimes is watching science videos.
Okay.
I'm always on YouTube, and all my bosses get mad at me because I'm always on YouTube watching videos channels like SciShow, Veritasium, old Bill Nye videos. And I think that's what I really want to do with my life, is become part of that community to promote science and all this good stuff. So I was wondering, since you're always speaking about science and religion and all that good stuff, do you have any tips on how to become a good science communicator?
One of the hardest pieces of it, and someone said this to me once, and it kind of sounds weird when you first say it, you have to be comfortable lying a little. And what I mean by that is, as scientists in the professional piece and professional world, we're really super careful about all the what ifs, and these are where we don't know things exactly. Here's our error bars. It might be these 3 things as well. All the caveats, all the things that we want to put on it. And the problem with that is it's important, and it's critical in the professional world. It's critical when you're writing a certain type of article. But in the communicating to the general public and other people, it's not really lying. I mean, I say that kind of facetiously. But what it is you got to be able to understand and distill what the core message is. The what ifs aren't, the exceptions, the what ifs aren't really that important in that moment. Those can be done as follow-ups with people, you know, when you have individual questions or you're giving a talk. If people are really getting into it in more depth, or if you do have the opportunity to write a book, sometimes that's where you can go into a little more depth. But in that moment, I mean, the most challenging moment for me was the first time I got to do a television show was The Science of Superman, and it was for National Geographic. And they actually had me go out and do a media promotion for it. And I got interviewed on Fox and Friends. And they literally give you like 20 to 30 seconds for your answer, way less time than I'm getting now, and they cut you off, right? They just cut you off with the next question. And I was warned, and I had some practice, but it was really weird to be like, ask the science question and have just 30 seconds to answer it, and it makes it very hard. And so negotiating that space of what's the essence of what you need to share, and then just trying to find language and analogies that make sense to everyday experience, because a lot of the cool science that people want to learn about, we don't have intuition for. You know, quantum mechanics and relativity are topics people like to ask me about, but you don't have an everyday experience of them. Everyday world is still Newtonian physics. And that's our intuition, and that's what we know about and we're comfortable with. So trying to find a way to describe it in different language. It's a lot like creative writing. You really are trying to come up with just a way of getting across a message that the key elements are true, but they're also in a language that's understandable. So that's a very good question, and it's something the world needs. The other thing I would ask you to think about, which is, I mean, I've done this odd path, right, is find these odd ways into presenting science to people. So I really like being on these strange shows that other scientists won't go on, because the people who watch those are also interested in science, and it's a way to get science to a different segment of society. So it's kind of fun. Thanks, great question. One more.
I knew that you did research, but I only recently found out that you have to raise your own money for the research.
Yes, I do.
So what is that process, and why exactly do you have to raise your own money?
So it's an interesting thing that many students don't understand, the way the university works, right? We are set up as faculty. You know, we're hired by the university to teach students for 9 months. We're also hired to do research. So as a faculty member, my salary for both teaching and research is covered. But that's pretty much it. There are a lot of what we call overhead resources. There's a lot of what the university gets from research money I bring in to provide the infrastructure for labs and research and support. And that, again, comes through money that I bring in to the university. And the way it works mostly is through government funding. So the National Science Foundation, the Department of Energy, the NIST, is one, and NIH, the National Institutes for Health. So these government agencies are responsible for funding what we call basic research. That's research at the universities that doesn't necessarily have an immediate application, but some might. Some people are working on things with an immediate application. And it's competitive. I have to write grants. People review them and make recommendations, and my grant has to be selected. It's somewhere between a 10 and 20% success rate. So I'm typically writing anywhere from 15 to 25 grant proposals before I get one funded. So if you think, you know, failing a test is a bad thing, I fail 19 times out of 20. But why do I need money? I need to pay grad students. I need to pay undergraduates at time to do research, because I think it's a great experience. That's something undergraduates get to do at UCI. Much better, I think, getting paid to work in my lab than to work at McDonald's. Nothing against McDonald's, but I also need the supplies, I need equipment, I need space. So, and often you have to even pay to get your work published. You need to pay to get to conferences, to present your work so people know about it. And every lab is different. I study what's called tabletop physics. So we do all our stuff in labs on tables this size. I don't need a lot of really expensive equipment. Mostly what I'm doing is paying salaries to students. So typically, I can get by with about $100,000 a year as a budget. It would be much better if I have sort of about $250,000 a year, and then overhead to the university. So that's a fair amount of money to raise, and it's becoming a challenge for faculty to, as there's more and more people doing research, less and less funding dollars from the government, and it's going to be an interesting challenge for the country going forward, because one of the things I provide, and most researchers provide through this money, is actually training for students, right? The graduate students and undergraduate training that they get by doing research in my lab is one of the most sought-off types of training for employers. So companies and employers really seek out our graduate students and undergraduates who've been trained for us because the skills, the problem-solving skills, the critical thinking, the communication skills are exactly what they're looking for. And it's actually, from companies, a very inexpensive way to get people trained. And the same for the country. Doing it through these government grants is a very inexpensive way to get a highly trained workforce, which then helps the economy and helps everything else. So it's a complicated system, but it is the way we in the US have decided to do it. So the research piece is funded by me going out and getting my own money, mostly writing grants, and the teaching and education piece is funded through the state, through tuition, and through fundraising. So that's kind of how it works.
I'm becoming in the third year, and I'm thinking about going into graduate school.
Okay.
And this is a question I think almost every student undergrad has in their life or in their undergraduate career is like, what do I do after I graduate? How do I figure out what do I want to do with my life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm still working on it. As you can see, one of, I think, the hopeful things is, I use my career as an example. The first part of my career, I would say, was about as standard could get. I was an undergraduate. I was a physics major. I didn't know what to do, but physics majors went to grad school, so I went to grad school. I didn't know what to do, but grad students get postdocs, so I got a postdoc. I didn't really know. By then, I was really hoping I would be a professor, but it was really tough. The job market's tough, and I got lucky, and I got a professorship. And then just by staying alert, I've ended up with these alternate careers of being on TV, having a YouTube series, writing a book, and ending up a vice provost. So, none of those would have been predicted by getting a degree in physics, particularly the TV career. So a lot of it, I think, it's very trite, but it's very true. A lot of it is figuring out what your passion is. And a lot of it is asking yourself, how patient and willing are you, if you need to just do a job so that you can actually make your passion and career happen as well. Because I consider myself incredibly lucky, right? My passion of doing physics aligned perfectly with the job I had, which was being a physics professor. So I could play in the lab and blow bubbles and study patterns and do all sorts of things, that you normally can't do easily unless that actually is your job. And so that's part of it. And part of it is recognizing that the world is changing some and that it is a little different. People do change careers. They do move around. And that is kind of being built into the structure. So it's a little less scary that people are doing that. I think the biggest advice I give to people starting out, though, is, in every generation, there's the examples of the people who seem to make it big quickly and easily. And the hard work that was involved or the things that didn't work are often hidden or not talked about. We don't talk about the failures along the way. And media now makes it even less obvious what the failures were and more obvious that people seem to get there quickly. And I think there's often the wrong expectation by students that if I just do this, I'll easily become a success quickly. And there's sometimes a lack of recognition of the hard work. So, I spent many, many years polishing plastic, cutting cables, cleaning glassware. That's what I did on my route to becoming a physicist, because those were kind of core basic skills that if I just didn't understand, I couldn't be successful. So when I look back at it, and that came out of just going up to faculty and professors and saying, can I work in your lab? Actually, my very first job as a physics student working for someone was driving them to the airport. Yep. I went, I said, do you have any job in your lab? They said, no, but we will in a year. I said, I'll do anything you need. Then they're like, well, we actually need people to drive us to the airport. So my first career was as a shuttle service to the airport. But it got me in the door. The professor knew me. Since I got them to every flight on time, they were willing to hire me in their lab where I polished plastic and cut cables and so on and moved up through the career. So there is something to be said for just starting with the nuts and bolts and working your way up. And grad school is a great place to do that and learn about a lot of these skills. So it's a nice transition, even if you're not going to be a professor, because like I said in some of the other questions, it really gets you those skills you need for lots and lots of different careers.
Yeah, and just as a follow-up question, how did you become, or how did your career in being in TV and Fox and Friends and Ancient Aliens, like how did that come about?
So that came about thanks to a student. So what happened, a student, and it's a lot in life about saying yes to things. Student invited me to come speak in the dorm on the first Superman movie, the science and physics in the first Superman movie. I'd never done anything like that before, but I said, what the heck, I'll try it. I did it. The student then gave me a book, Science of Superheroes, and the campus started freshman seminars. I'm like, this 10 weeks, this is 10 chapters. That makes a freshman seminar, so I'll do that. There was a very slow news day, I suspect, in Orange County one day, and the science writer for the Orange County paper noticed that I had a class on Science of Superheroes and did an article on me. LA Times picked it up. Prometheus Production saw the article on me. They needed someone for the Science of Superman. They called and interviewed me. They liked how I was, and then the rest was history. So there really is not obvious pass-off into things, but it's just being alert to stuff. One of the tricks was, and it was a tough decision, I don't know if I could have asked for money the first time, but since I thought it was something that I might want to do, I just said yes the first time, even though they said they couldn't pay me. So occasionally being willing to do those things as an entree into something else. Now, it helped that I had a full-time job. I could do something for free. But good question, thank you.
I just wanted to know whether or not you thought that grad school was necessary, because I don't believe that I want to go to grad school, but some people believe that grad school is more beneficial.
You know, it really necessary, definitely. I'm not someone who says it's necessary. I would definitely say that. A lot depends what you want to do, where you are, where you're trying to get. To be a professor, you know, there's a few things. Then it is necessary. It's sort of like going to medical school to be a doctor, right? Because almost every faculty position requires that you have a PhD, you have the advanced degree from grad school. A lot really depends what you want to do. The other thing about it is plenty of people go back and go later, right? If you really don't know what you want to do and you have other viable options, you can explore them first. I mean, my wife ended up getting 2 masters all after we had 3 kids, so much later in life. So that's the other thing I find fascinating as I've been watching students for 19 years. There's no one path. I always like to share the story of my advisor in grad school. He came over from Germany when he was 11 or 12. Wasn't really great in college, kind of he worked in a cement factory, worked on a horse ranch, eventually ended up back in graduate school for chemistry. He's now a member of the National Academy of Sciences, one of the highest awards. He's, I mean, world famous in his field, has won numerous awards in science, worked at AT&T Bell Labs for many years, one of the premier research institutions, then ended up at UC Santa Barbara. So yeah, he didn't go straight to grad school and it worked out. So a lot depends what you want to do and where you are. It certainly has great benefits, and it's a great place for training. It's a great place to do a lot of things and learn a lot of things. But no, I wouldn't necessarily say it's necessary, but it is a great option. But it's also an option you can take at multiple times in your life. So one of the things that I've gotten to do as Vice Provost, which is brand new, is finally actually start on social media. So I actually tweet. Now, I did get to do that a few years ago when I did a class for The Walking Dead, because they made us get a Twitter account. So my only tweets for many years were just on zombies. But I'm at Den and Michael on Twitter, and on Facebook I'm at Prof. Den and Michael. Well, thank you guys for joining me. This was our first set of questions with students. I was very excited, very good questions, and we hope to continue this throughout the year. Thank you for joining us here.